folks, welcome to Right Now, Trump Story Truths. This is episode number 17, I think. We have, the last time I left you with the Novel Factory software program. It cost about $80 to $90. It's a good way to keep your novel, your story, drama, whatever, organized, so you don't waste any time with a bunch of papers sitting all around like I do. So yeah, it's really a time saver. If you don't have a lot of time, you can just work on a little bit at a time. Just open it up and do a little bit more. We created a premise last time, which is right here. Donald J. Trump, fatigued and weak from a constant 4 years of attacks on his person, family, and character, finances. Can he return to finish the job of swamp cleaning? Is he facing too many enemies? I should have added an O in there. Whoops. Is his life in danger? Will the people be safe when he returns? When 3 people are killed, will he blame himself and quit? And we tighten that into one sentence. When 3 senators are killed in a riot where the Antifa attacks the Capitol, will Donald Trump, fatigued from 4 years of holding up the nation while being attacked, be able to find strength from God to take on Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the deep state, or will he collapse and give up and flee? This is already starting to sound like a fiction novel. All you have to do is plug in different names in there, and you have a novel. Or it could be the starts of a biography, many things. So now we're going to move to the skeleton of the story. So we just press that there, goes there. The skeleton, aka the universal storyline. Now we've got a basic premise, which is here, and it's one sentence. One long sentence, but it's a sentence. Which means we've got the beginnings of a story. It's time to give it a few more bones and see how it starts to take shape. Luckily for us, we don't have to grope around in the dark, guessing at what elements we should include and in what order, to create a gripping and satisfactory story with a good beginning, middle, and end. That's because there's already an established series of stages that the vast majority of all decent stories go through. The universal storyline, also known as the hero's journey and the monomyth, it goes something like that. This. You have an overview here. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. In Act 1, you got an introduction into the protagonist's world, and then a call to action, which is probably the inciting incident, and then a crossing the threshold, which is the door of plot point 1 that the character leaves in Act 1 and goes into Act 2, and he or she commits themselves to the action, whereas in Act 1 they were hesitant. They go forward with the action, maybe reluctantly, but they do go forward into Act 2. So crossing the threshold is called plot point 1. There's a kind of a twist there. He learns something, or she does something that gets her closer to understanding what she needs to do. Act 2, the mentor teaches the lead. A lot of times, the beginning of Act 2 can be a backstory. So that could be a mentor from the past. And in Act 2, you have your first challenge, and your temptation, and then your dark moment. In Act 2 also is split up. Since Act 2 is twice as long as Act 1 and twice as long as Act 3, it is split up into 2 sections. Act 2, midpoint, and then plot point 2. So the mentor might teach the lead in a backstory or something. A challenge comes up, which you could have the midpoint either at the first challenge or else the temptation. Because the midpoint is a very big turning point in the story. A reversal, you can choose between having a reversal or just a plot twist. A reversal is total turnaround. A plot twist is kind of just bending and twisting a little bit. And then the dark moment is usually in plot point 2, not to be formulaic, but that's the way it's taught anyway, for popular fiction, is formulaic, I guess, to a certain extent. So the dark moment, the person the hero feels completely abandoned, like they have no hope, like everything has been tried. Now they may have, before the dark moment, a time of success where they think everything is going to go and they're going to win. Finally, they're going to win. But that's a false success, because soon the dark moment comes and they realize they were never winning. The dark moment is the shadow moment, the moment the character faces their worst fears, the moment they have to overcome something within themselves so that they can take on something without themselves. So that's plot 2, which is a door into Act 3, where the final conflict will take place. You'll have the crisis will build up into the climax, and an epiphany will take place either at the dark moment or in Act 3 before the final conflict. And then there's a return home, kind of a relaxing of the plot, untwisting of the knot, which is called the denouement, untwisting of the knot. And it ends with a wrap-up scene that mirrors the beginning scene sometimes. They like to do it that way. In fact, there are a lot of thematic mirrors within the story, not just the beginning scene and the final scene. But don't be confused into thinking this only applies to fantasy stories with knights and castles. This set of stages can be interpreted in a million different ways to create every story, from The Lord of the Rings to The Matrix to The Lion King to The Da Vinci Code to Harry Potter to Star Wars. You know, a lot of people don't count romances as comedies. They think a comedy is just where you laugh and joke all the time, and really in literature, a comedy is any positive plot where the character goes down and then the rest of the story goes back up till finally they end on a good note. This could be a comedy, it could be funny, laughter, but it just means anything good. Even a romance would be considered a comedy at times. So the hero returns home having slain the dragon or whatever, and he returns to his home environment changed, and he is in the same place then as he was before, but it's totally different to him now after the experience. Next time you're watching a movie or reading a book, look out for the stages and try to identify the ways in which the author has portrayed them. In order to create stages for your own story, you'll need a little bit more about them. So here are brief summaries of each. Act 1. Introduction to the hero's world. You set the scene. Introduce your characters and their normal life, just in time for them to call to action, which is probably the inciting incident, the inciting event. Be torn from it. You set the scene, introduce your character and their normal life just in time for them to be torn from it with the call to action. Actually, it's better if they are not torn, but have to commit to the decision themselves. For some reason, they always want the hero to be reluctant to enter into the story and take his or her role in the story. I think it's because if the hero jumped into the story too quickly, we might see him or her as being a kind of foolish for jumping in and may deserve everything they get. Whereas if they are reluctant to commit, then it shows wisdom in a way, and you can't really blame the hero, because the hero didn't cause the whole thing, but was pulled into it, dragged into it. But they still, you want them to commit to the decision to go forward themselves. A lot of times you'll have somebody that is reluctant, but then they'll see the error of their ways because there's somebody that needs help, somebody weaker than them. In any case, the challenge is put forward. You can stop building sympathy for your character by ensuring their decision is something the reader can identify with or respect. So you can gain the reader's interest by identifying them with not just sympathy, which might have been done before, but identify them with good traits. Not that they won't have any bad traits at all, but they need good traits, character, to be respected. Because you can't usually bring your character through a whole story with just sympathy. After a while, the reader will get tired of being sympathy all the time. You want your character to cross the threshold. To me, that means each plot point is a threshold to me. The character is launched across the threshold in plot point 1 as they go from Act 1, which is the time of discovering and rejecting the mission, until they commit as they go into Act 2 through an open door, which is plot point 2. And there's kind of a twist or reversal, and they go into Act 2 and now they're committed. They can't go back. You can't only go through one way through this door. Once you cross that threshold, you're in Act 2. Your mentor is waiting for you so that you can learn to deal with this world. You're headed towards the midpoint where there will be a even harder twist of the plot, twist of the character, theme, whatever. And it may be a full reversal. Often the midpoint is a full reversal. So, crossing the threshold, in order to ensure your lead has the pressure on, and therefore your readers are hooked into something, into wondering how they'll ever get out of this mess, it's good if your hero crosses some kind of threshold that is difficult. Plot point 2 would also be a threshold. A door you go through Act 2 and into Act 3. You got to cross that threshold. And once you cross the threshold, you aren't going back. It's difficult to cross the threshold, if not impossible. To get back to the ordinary life, it may be a physical journey across land, the removal of allies, self-inflicted isolation, or becoming wanted and on the run. When you're in your normal world, maybe you feel safe, maybe not. Depends on what type of story it is. A tragedy would put the hero as not being safe. Sorry. Until the story ended, which, since it ends tragically, they'll be safe because they're dead or something. Anyway, going into Act 2, there will be a transition. It's like you go from Act 1 into the Plot 1, and Plot 1 has a door in it that takes you into Plot 2, so it transitions you cleanly. Where you meet the mentor. You could meet the mentor in Plot Point 1 if you wanted to, and then they could both pass in where the mentor would start teaching him in Act 2. I guess you could do it about any way you want. The readers want to see a character develop into a real hero who can overcome the odds. Everybody needs help sometimes. Mentors in popular fiction include Dumbledore, Morpheus, Rafiki, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Morpheus is in Matrix, and he teaches the hero how to fight. I don't know why I can't think of it. So the first challenge comes along, I suppose, after the mentor teaches the hero. I noticed often the challenges against the teacher, the mentor themselves, sometimes. But usually they take their what they've learned, and a lot of times they'll take it out too early. They won't have enough time. They'll be at less odds. The odds will be more stacked up against them because they're going too early. Just like Nazi Germany, Hitler was impatient and he had to keep going and driving and driving. If he would have just took over a couple of countries and then stopped there, he probably could have overtaken the world because the scientific advantages were so high, but he didn't. He got greedy. So we got our first challenge. It's time to put your lead under pressure. It may be that they have a first encounter with the villain, or for a slower build, it could be the villain's cronies. So that reminds me of Jacob in the Bible, where he stole or tricked his brother Esau out of the birthright, and then he ran at his mom's bidding to his uncle Laban, who lived far away, and he spent, about 21 years or so there, and he ended up getting rich, mostly because of his craftiness against Laban's craftiness. But he came to an end of his craftiness when he approached home, and he knew that Esau was coming to him, and he felt Esau was going to kill him. So he's under a lot of pressure. So it builds as Jacob takes his kids and puts them out in front of him, and he finally gets up there and he says, "All I have is yours." And instead of the brother killing him, Esau welcomes him. So they have the first challenge. Readers want a character developed into a real hero who can overcome the odds. Everybody needs help sometimes. 007, I remember watching him. He's always defying the odds. He should have been dead a long time ago, of course. If there was really anybody ever like that, they would be. But I think it's called the Casino Royale. He is in a card game, poker I think, and he places a heavy bet. And he is poisoned. So he goes out to his car, and it just so happens in his car is, lo and behold, a medical kit, or quite a medical kit. He's able to take an antidote to the poison and go back up into the card game, I think. So that doesn't happen in real life, but it shows you time to put your lead under pressure. Now that's a lot of pressure when you're going to die and you know it, but in the nick of time you're saved. It may be that they have your first encounter with the villain, or for a slower build, it could be the villain's cronies. It's like the Bruce Lee Game of Death, I think, where he starts out with the lowest person on the totem pole, which is actually the lowest person in some type of a house. And he works his way from the lowest person all the way up to the top until he finally gets to the person who runs everything. And of course that person doesn't have a chance against him and tries to leave. Eventually he's going to have a temptation. "I can resist everything except temptation," said someone pithy. "Add depth to your lead by giving them a challenge that they have to find the strength of character to overcome." I suppose that means they are tempted to give up. They are tempted to say no. They are tempted to not do as good as they should. And that adds depth to it, because they must dig deeply through that temptation so that the temptation becomes a challenge that they overcome with the strength of their character. It's sort of like with this Trump situation that we're going through right now. Everybody that knows what's going on is realizing something's wrong. A lot of people, too, are realizing something's wrong, even though they don't know exactly what's going on. So there's going to be, in most people, an anxiousness, a fear that something is going to happen to them. That right now we feel that the deep state, the Democrat Party, the cabal, whatever, is trying to take us over. That China has bought off our politicians and is trying to take over the United States of America, and our politicians have decided a few $100 million is worth it for them. They're willing to sell out their whole country, hundreds of millions of people, potentially billions of people all over the world, for a few $100 million so they can enjoy the rest of their lives in richness. So this temptation, they got to dig deeply, and they should see it as a challenge that they need the strength of character to overcome, which leads to the dark moment. Maybe in the temptation they make a breakthrough, and they see their chance and they think they're going to win, but then bam, into the dark moment where everything seems to fall apart, where their shadow self takes over. The darkness seems to be more powerful than the light. If they're a Christian, that especially means they're separated from God and they don't know why, and they don't want that. Or they're dealing with their weakness. As you, perhaps Trump went through his dark moment when he was impeached the second time, and he was accused of causing a riot that he didn't cause. Or maybe his dark moment was a different time. We all have at least one dark moment, I suppose. As you near the climax of your book, Circumstances start piling up. Push your lead to the limits, to the point they are questioning everything they know, and nearly everything, and nearly slip into the dark side. I guess that would be Luke Skywalker in the third, maybe, film. Luke, I am your father. No, no, I won't go to the dark side. The closer they get to failing, the more nail-biting it will be. Oh, it is nail-biting. We're wondering if Luke is going to turn to the dark side, which would ruin his life and kind of ruin the whole Star Wars trilogy. But in the end, they pull through, which brings them to Act 3, the final battle. The final battle. This is the climax of your story, and you must pull out all the stops to make it great. We will work on this in great detail later, looking at what makes a satisfying ending. So for now, you should just have a loose idea of whether your hero succeeds or fails. So the climax, right now, we're just going to kind of create a situation, kind of sketch it out. We're not going to get too specific yet. The climax of the story, everything is at its strongest. The intensity will be at its strongest. The colors, everything. Characters will be at their strongest, even though they were weak in the shadow, dark moment. You got to pull out all the stops, and this is going to be the scene that everybody is excited to read, where everything happens, where all of a sudden everything in the battle takes place in a satisfying long time, and we can just sketch it out, the climax. And we want to have epiphany, which usually takes place in the dark moment, or it could take place at the beginning of Act 3. Maybe a couple of pinch point scenes, which are just small scenes that help you to get from place to place. You pull out all stops to make it great. And I guess we'll work on that later, looking at what it takes, makes a satisfying ending. So for now, you should just have a loose idea of whether your hero succeeds or fails. And then you return home, of course. Once your climax is completed, all there's to do is to tie up loose ends. Denouement, loosen the knot. Will your lead live happily ever after? Do they return home or stay in their new place? Who is with them at the end? Here is a table demonstrating the hero's journey in several blockbusters. Star Wars. Luke is living with his aunt in the introduction, his Aunt and Uncle. Call to action. Princess Leia's message. Crossing the threshold, family home is destroyed. When the family home is destroyed, there's no going back. The mentor teaches the lead. Obi-Wan Kenobi teaches him how to fight. The first challenge is the compactor, the trash compactor. The temptation, Luke is tempted by the dark side. The dark moment, Obi-Wan Kenobi is killed, leaving him alone. The final conflict, battle with the Death Star. And the return home, Luke is rewarded with medals. The Matrix. Neo is working in a boring job. His name's Neo. Follow. Call to action. Follow the White Rabbit. Crossing the threshold. Neo is taken out of the Matrix for the first time. Mentor teaches the lead. Morpheus explains. The first challenge. Battle with Agent Smith. Temptation. Live in the illusion of the Matrix. Just lose yourself in the Matrix and forget about everything else. It's too painful, real life. The dark moment, Morpheus is tortured. That's the dark moment. The final conflict is the subway battle. The return home, Neon speaks to the awoken masses. So your task, on the planning tab, click expand under the story skeleton. Write a single line into each of the fields describing the elements of the universal storyline. So the skeleton. Here's the story skeleton. I wonder if that's the same thing. Yeah, it is. So, we need to Act 1, Introduction to the Protagonist's World. Let's go with opening scene. Now let's do it in capitals. Opening scene. Donald Donald Trump is running his business and happy, doing just fine. When he is approached by the military, who want him to run for president. I guess we should take this and cut it out and put it here, call to action, because when he's approached by the military to become president, he's okay. So his real world, he's doing just fine. He's happy. He's thinking of starting a new television show, or maybe getting back into building great office buildings. Maybe there is something nagging at him that he could be doing something different. Maybe he is feeling a call by God to do something important. Ever since his mother gave him the family Bible and told him the story of a revival she attended long ago. Especially when she told him he had been named after a Donald she met who was a kid at the Welsh revival. It just seems to Donald Trump that though he's comfortable, there must be more to life. Okay, call to action. He's approached by the military who wants him to run for president. They tell him part of the story. He will get the rest of the story if he commits. Meanwhile, Donald J. Trump is told that the country is in danger of falling to communism. Not just communism, but to the CCP, Communist China, Communist Chinese Communist Party. It is an appealing proposition, but the President of the United States, how could he win? What must he go through to throw a whole country out of its momentum toward damnation and take it in a new direction? When he sees a prophet named Climax over the airwaves on a religious broadcast, he is called out by name and told that, yes, you will win the election. He is in dire straits. Take on the whole swamp. He finally Donald J. Trump finally realizes that God, the God he hasn't paid much attention to, is really on his side. God has a plan for this to wake up America to the evil politicians, social media, news media, and even judges and presidents. Not to leave out governors, mayors, Congress people, and senators. It seems that even the FBI, CIA, and maybe even the NSA are corrupted. How will he tell the evil treasonous traitors from the ones who are good? How will he sort the good seed away from the thorns. It seems a mess. How will he discover the Rhino Republicans who say they have his back, but abandon him just when he needs them most? Indeed, he must have a plan. But thankfully, he has both God and the military on his side. Okay. So we're going to go to Act 2. And so Act 1 was the introduction to the protagonist's world. We did that. The call to action and the crossing of the threshold. Now we go into Act 2. I guess we go directly to there. The mentor teaches, and you begin in Act 2, the mentor teaches the protagonist. And we know that Donald Trump went to military school when he was younger. I don't think he was in the military, but he did attend a military school. So, flash, of course you could do this a million ways, but we'll flash back into Donald J. Trump's past when in military school. As a young man, he enjoyed the game of chess. He enjoyed any game where you could pit your strategic mind against another, just put against a worthy opponent. Okay. Games to Trump were a chance as a young man to learn skills. He didn't play video games. He didn't play checkers much. He loved strategy. And I'm kind of branching out into fiction. I'm filling things in. He loved to follow. Actually, I don't have to follow. I know his favorite book, The Art of War. I've heard that that was his favorite book, and also he wrote later on, and he wrote The Art of the Deal, which The Art of War or The Art of the Deal. His love for strategy and winning traveled with him into adult life, where he succeeded at business and developed skills dealing with people. As a true gamesman, Donald Trump went by the rule of the law. Careful to do everything in his life and business, in his We know he makes mistakes. In his business, above board and cleanly. And we know they've been looking for skeletons in his closet for crazy, especially Nancy Pelosi. They want him out of there because they want to take over. Okay, Donald Trump's first challenge. I know from reading his biography that, or his book Art of the Deal, that his first challenge, well, Donald Trump's first adult challenge was building his first building without much help from his father. In our story, his first challenge will be putting a plan together to avoid cheating Hillary and win the presidency. It's no use having a great plan if you can't even win the primaries. Then you must win the general election against a Democrat who wins by cheating. Luckily, the military is there to help him and stop Hillary from winning using Dominion machines. Alright, the temptation. What temptation? We're probably about ready for the twist in the midpoint. So the temptation is going to be the twist. Though God has told him he will win, he has a hard time submitting to the authority of God. After all, he is a new Christian, and he must relearn a lot of bad habits, or at least unchristian habits. Donald Trump gets carried away sometimes with pride. He must resist that, and instead of succumbing to the temptation of floating up in pride and pushing God out, which is his natural reactions to competitive situations. he needs to humbly submit to God or lose what he has finally gained. It is very hard for Donald Trump to stand back and let God work. He often says the wrong thing, which delights the politicians he's running against. But they soon learn to hate him when they see that him lacking skills as a politician separates him from the swamp and endears him to the public even more. Donald Trump goes through his darkest moment the second time he is impeached. He has been relentlessly stalked, accused of being a spy, lying, being too crafty, on the other hand, being too weak. Nobody will give him a break. He must earn every good thing he gets from anyone. He feels defeated as he sees the people around him, those close to him, are betraying him. They think because of their own pride and deafness to his and their own pride and blindness to who Trump really is, that he doesn't notice. He does. He is making his list of not only the bad people the military warned him about, but also a list of rhino Republicans he will have to replace once this thing is over and he helps the military pick out a new Okay, we get to Act 3. Oh, I guess we got to do Act 3. Alright, what do we need in the final conflict? That'd be the epiphany is that he realizes he has a clean board. The rhinos, evil traders, and those who fight for right causes and the Constitution are apparent to him now. He sees the board clearly now. Right. The crisis continues as he fights lawsuits. Nancy Pelosi would not give up. She impeached him for nothing. She sicked well on him as a dig at him by appointing him in charge of Trump's impeachment. Other Democrats join in and invade his privacy, even as a private citizen. They sue to get his taxes so they can search for something to hang him on. They need anything they can get: a smoking gun, a skeleton in his closet. The press joins in to do what they did for 4 or 5 years. They blame him for things he didn't do, or at least insinuate he did them. For example, one news article asks the question of, is Donald Trump guilty of tax crimes or something like that? A mob attorney, or a mafia attorney, is hired specifically to take over the case. So they insinuate, this is a real article too, I don't know if I have it perfectly, but they insinuate that he's a mob, he's got ties to the mob. They don't really state it out loud. They just say, is he guilty? And then they say, they add that on to that they hired a mob lawyer, which you take both those things together and it's an assumption that he is guilty of something. And they've been doing that for the last 5 years. But he's out of sight now, and now the deep state, or Biden, or Nancy Pelosi, or Chuck Schumer, Jerry Nadler, Schiff, the FBI that investigated him. They're the targets now. So the return home, Trump returns to Florida. What do they call it? Maricopa, something like that, to take a vacation while Joe Biden does all the work for him, exposing himself. Really, there are many people behind Biden who are really running things. Okay. Meanwhile, Donald Trump relaxes for the first time in 5 or so years. Now, without people interrupting him and pulling him 10 directions at once, he deals with the emotions he has had to set aside for the past few years. This is a time of growth for Trump. He was a baby Christian, but this time of struggle, his Elijah moment, he will be available to God and stretched by the stress into a more mature Christian who now understands more the true nature of God, and that when he is rested and returns to the White House to face even more strenuous battles against United States and Israel's enemies. The central bank, George Soros, Facebook, Twitter, Google, and YouTube, the 5 main news agencies, and countless papers. It seems everyone is against him, but now with God on his side, now that he understands in a more mature way the power of God, he and is rested, he will go out on to the path of politics again, this time much stronger and wiser. much stronger, wiser, and with the knowledge of who his enemy really will be. Alright, finally done. Okay. So, thank goodness we got that done. Now I'm going to quit there, of course. I don't know how long it's been, but it's been a long time. I'm going to save that. I should have saved it already. I don't know where I saved it last time, or what name I saved it under. The Novel Factory, new novel. Did I even save it last time? I don't think I did. Huh. Okay. Life of Donald Trump podcast. Alright. Or what did I name this? Oh, I forget. Okay. And I'll save it in another place here. Make sure it's safe. And even yet another place. Just to make sure all that work doesn't go for naught. Alright. Next time, we will study the character introductions. Thank you for sticking with me this long, and have a good day.